Nate, we are reviewing the best X-Men movie. My pillow is on my butt.
This is definitely the greatest movie, and Pillow wants some action there.
That's very true. Don't we all? A little bit of the Degenerate, hey, you know?
Nice.
So here's the thing. X3 is pretty bad.
Yeah.
This is not a very good movie.
It's pretty horrible.
I wish it was better. We do have, believe it or not, a few good things to say about the movie. But overall, just before we get into it, this is a bad movie. Look, we don't like everything, okay? So I want to make that clear here. Brightburn and X3 are both on the hit list.
Are the bane of our existences.
They're both on the hit list here.
The hit list.
So here's the thing. With this movie, we always talk about themes. There's very few themes.
Yeah, that was one of the issues of the movie, actually, was that it felt like there wasn't a direction, or at least a clear direction, because they really had like 3 storylines going on in this movie.
Yeah,
and
actually more.
Yeah, it felt like a worse Spider-Man 3. Like, Spider-Man 3 was actually like fun.
Mm-hmm.
I know like a lot of people just got triggered there, but it was actually like fun.
Well, yeah, and there's a pretty decent version of that film too, the editor's cut.
Yeah.
But the thing with this movie is there's no decent cut to save it. Really, you have a bunch of things going on, and before we get into spoilers, you know, anything we talk about in this section is stuff you would have seen in marketing or the trailers.
Yeah.
The non-spoiler section. With all the different storylines, you have Wolverine's storyline of accepting, you know, his part in the X-Men is still going on. You have Storm's storyline is actually picked up here with her sort of becoming a more prominent figure. You have a romantic storyline between Kitty Pryde, you know, Bobby Drake, I think that's his name, Iceman, and Rogue.
Yeah.
So, and you know, it would have been better if we just cut Bobby Drake out there and we just had it between Kitty Pryde and Rogue.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Sadly, we had to go with Iceman.
Yeah.
And you know, you still had the Cure too. You had Magneto. There's actually, you could probably extrapolate 10 storylines from this movie.
Yeah, it was weird. And the thing is, they all were there and they all didn't really mesh very well together. It was just like one scene is like, oh, now we're advancing that storyline. Next scene, oh, now we're advancing this storyline.
Yeah, and this is supposed to be a movie about Dark Phoenix in a way. This was supposed to be the Dark Phoenix saga, and it's not that at all. There's almost no Dark Phoenix in this movie.
That's like a backstory.
They also don't explain the Dark Phoenix really in any way.
Really. They're like, oh, she's here.
I do want to say, though, there was growth for Wolverine, which is something that we kind of talked about. Like, that is something that was actually at least good. And this movie did bring some small X-Men members to life, you know, and put them into a more prominent role. Kitty Pryde. Colossus, which we only saw him in
X2.
like 2 scenes in X2.
Yeah.
So they actually push him out there a little bit. We saw some more interesting villains here. Juggernaut was terrible, but at least they tried, I guess.
At least he was there.
On the Juggernaut, bitch. That's the worst line in all of cinema.
That's second worst, too. You know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?
Huh?
Same thing that happens to everything else. Like,
they just yeet Toad out of there. Yeah, I don't know. That was one of the few good things in terms of the positives of the movie before we get into spoilers. Before we get into spoilers, do you have anything else to say? Because we're trying to make these a little briefer.
Not really. If we're in the pre-spoiler section, I don't really have a lot to say. It's just kind of bad.
Yeah.
I think me and you listed or reviewed all of them like together, and this is probably our second least favorite X-Men movie.
Yeah,
if we were just doing all of the X-Men movies.
This is definitely the second worst X-Men movie for sure. It's not the worst though, believe it or not, which is the scary thing.
The worst one is our next one.
Yeah, definitely. So we're gonna move into spoilers here. So you know, if you just want a brief idea of this movie, this is an okay superhero film. It's fine. It's not very good. There's worse things you could watch. You could be watching, you know, Norton's Incredible Hulk or X-Men Origins Wolverine. But there's way better films you could be watching. Some of them are not even in the X universe or even mainline movies. If you want some good underrated superhero movies that you could watch instead of this, Unbreakable or Split. Those are a couple that are really interesting. They're much better movies than this. So just because this is a main brand movie doesn't make it good.
Right.
It's just meh. To move into the spoilers, though, there's a ton of negatives that we'll get into. The first one was Cyclops, because James Marsden, that was his name, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was thinking John Marston. But
John Marston.
James Marsden was pretty much cast out of this movie because he was busy, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, so he had some contractual differences with a different studio.
Well, and that's how we were able to get him in today. We actually had James Marsden.
Yeah, I'm here right now. I'm here actually reviewing my favorite movie ever that I was in.
Did you know that you passed up another X-Men movie to be here, sir?
Oops. Well, so anyways, instead of like trying to do the logical thing of, oh, maybe we should work out a deal, figure out a way to change our schedule so we can be in the movie, they decided to just, let's kill him off. In like 20 minutes.
It's weird too because Logan and Cyclops fought all the time over Jean. That was kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then Cyclops is just yeeted out of existence within the first 10 minutes of the movie, I believe. I think 10 minutes in,
like
he
10
dies.
or 20 minutes.
Yeah, he just dies right away. And then it just moves on to Logan's connection with her, which I understand is important, but the fact that Cyclops could have played a big role in this, and this could have also really come to a head between the Cyclops and Logan conflict could have come to a head here.
Yeah.
And they could have sort of learned to put aside their differences at the end and become friends or something. I know that's a little cliche, but it's something you could have done.
Something better than just killing him.
Right, they wrote the main romantic interest of Jean Grey, who was supposed to be a focus of the movie, out of the movie. So then the emotional impact of her turn is lost on a lot of people because you also have the fact Professor X is killed off non-impactfully very early on as well. So the two people with the closest ties to Jean Grey are just yeeted out of existence. They're just dead. And then you just have Logan, and you have to play off of his relationship with her, which works, but you lost all the emotional ties to her. I will say, without getting into anything about Dark Phoenix, at least Dark Phoenix kept around the characters that cared about Jean Grey.
Yeah.
So you actually care somewhat.
Right.
Or you get why they care, even if you don't give a crap. You get why they care. In this, it's kind of just like, Storm doesn't really seem to mind much what's happening with Jean. Right. And Logan's the only one, he's like, it's because I want her, I want to take a dip down somewhere, you know what I'm saying?
He wants to get the machete out and crawl through the forest.
Yeah, he wants to take his Wolverine for a bath in the Pink Lake.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of weird. And speaking of Cyclops going back, the only mentioning of him is Logan, finds his glasses at Alkali Lake, and then is randomly to Jean Grey like, "What'd you do to Cyclops?
What happened to Scott, Jean?"
Yeah. And then Jean just ran off crying or whatever she ran off doing. I don't even remember. It didn't matter. Well, and then she and then it did it get brought up again?
No, until the very
end when you saw him on a gravestone. It was like, what?
That's what's really funny about this movie too, is there's a lot of stuff like that where things are just dropped. Another one too was they sort of mention Professor X putting up psychic barriers to protect Jean Grey. Something they'd get into much more in a later movie, still was never done well. But in here they mention it once or twice, and then Logan's like, "Why'd you do that?" And he's like, "I don't have to explain myself to you, idiot," basically.
Yeah.
And it was the most non-Patrick Stewart Professor X.
Yeah, it was everything up until that point. He was the nicest, most accepting, most forgiving guy. And then Logan's like, well, why did you mess with her mind and put up berries? You're like, well, I don't have to explain anything to you.
I know.
Okay.
I know. It felt really weird and out of place.
I was all right.
And I don't understand why they did that. The writing in this movie is very uneven with these characters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing, too, with Logan goes back and forth from this, really stoic, macho guy in this. I keep having to move this stupid pillow. I'm just taking this thing out next time we record. Okay. He moves back and forth between this very stoic guy to a crying mess in this, too, which is a little odd for his character. There's a lot of stuff that was done weirdly in this. I do want to point out, too, that the whole cure thing was the most rushed point in the world. It had no impact on the story, really, other than to serve as a way to defeat Magneto in the end and to radicalize him.
Yeah.
But you don't really care about his radicalization because most of his mutants are never named.
No, they're just mutants.
One of the things that's really funny is, and I hear it mocked all the time online when this movie comes up, is the scene where Wolverine fights a bunch of unnamed mutants in the forest.
Yep.
And just kills them. Just because. And you just don't care. That's the problem.
You have no idea who any of them are.
You have no emotional impact or anything. I know one of them was Spike. And that's it.
Yeah. And then they randomly also threw Angel in there too.
For 2 scenes.
Yeah. And then he had that big epic scene at the end where he caught his dad. But it was oh, okay.
Yeah, no one cares.
All right.
That's the thing too. I mean, other than other than that stuff, it's just weird. The writing is uneven, and honestly, they randomly cut out a bunch of characters from earlier X movies. The biggest one being Nightcrawler, who took a big center stage in 2.
Yeah, it was like, what happened to him?
Yeah, and that happened a lot in this movie. You had him cut out. You basically had Professor X cut out of the story. You pretty much had Cyclops cut out of the story. In some ways, you almost had Rogue cut out of the story because it's almost like they realized halfway through, oh, Kitty Pryde is more interesting than Rogue.
Yeah.
Let's just move her out.
Yeah, and also her storyline was kind of weird.
Yeah, it's really weird.
So,
it's just, I want this drug. No, maybe I don't.
It's like, I want the
Okay,
iced
I
tea.
do. Yeah, that's it. There's nothing to a lot of these characters in this movie, which is really disappointing. I guess there are some positives, though, which we'll mention briefly.
Yeah, so one positive was actually Beast.
Yeah.
He was actually pretty cool. And my favorite scene of him, obviously, was at the very end when Wolverine, like, created a distraction with Magneto, and then Beast, like, came flying in from the background and, like, just stabbed him with, like, 12 cures.
I know.
I also like how he had to use, like, 5 cures just to beat Magneto. Like, that's how powerful Magneto was.
This goes without saying, Logan's character is interesting as always. He's
Yeah.
never really not.
He's good at everything he's in.
He's even good in the bad movies.
Yep.
And I do think that Patrick Stewart did a good job for the small part of the movie he was in.
Yeah.
I know that's not saying a lot here, but I'm trying to give this movie
He did good
credit.
for what he was given.
Yes.
You know, his acting was not bad.
No.
His writing was bad.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and there was a really weird ending where they imply that he gets put in another person's body.
Yeah, what was up with that?
I don't...
They did not explain it well.
Well, here's what's funny about that. So going forward, you have the fact that he was transferred into this other mutant's body or whatever, the person's body.
Yeah.
His consciousness. Now, the mutant abilities are tied to their genetics, you know?
Yeah.
So here's the problem. After this movie, he still has his powers. And he's still crippled, by the way. So how is he, one, not able to walk? And two, how can he even use his powers? Are they saying it's tied to his consciousness now?
I think so.
Which that defeats the entire...
Doesn't make sense.
No, that the whole thing is about genetics and evolution and stuff. If it's just you could body hop into a different body and be fine, why wouldn't he just do that forever?
Right.
Or why wouldn't any mutant get a psychic mutant to do that for them?
Also, the other thing is that woman doctor in the end credits scene, was she like going all Batman like hush on the person to make him look like Patrick Stewart?
Yeah,
like
I don't know.
It was this weird like body that was somehow a replica of Professor X.
Well, and I saw people say in theories, oh, well, maybe he's just projecting that image of himself. But even if he...
Well, what's the point?
Even if he was, how would that make any sense? Because he's still paralyzed.
Yeah.
Not to like harp on that point, but come on. He jumped into another body that happened to have the same spinal.
And he's like, no. I want to be paralyzed.
Now, wait a
still.
second here. I want you to keep that body warm for me and sever the spine, please. It's like, no,
I want my wheelchair.
I don't think he'd do that. None of it makes any sense going forward. It was clearly just a weird writing decision. And then they try to write it off later on in Wolverine, which we'll get to when we get to Wolverine. The whole Professor X stealth thing is really dumb. I like how that fell into positives.
Yeah.